It is 6:45, so we are good to start. This is our first ever Theology on Tech, and thank you all for coming. You guys want to introduce yourselves?
I'm Father Kevin Anderson. I'm the pastor here at Christ Our Light Parish. Welcome.
And I'm Teresa Callison. I'm our operations coordinator here. Thanks for joining us tonight. We will get started right with a good one here right away for you.
Okay.
Why do you believe in God?
Why do I believe in God? Just because everything I see around me and my whole life has always been kind of like the face and voice of God. It's like I turn that around and ask how people can't believe in God, that type of thing. Just because I think, there's too many God moments, and throughout my life I've had some very specific God encounters, I would call them. So I just see everything as that life and breath and face of God.
I just had another question come in here. What is your favorite book of the Bible?
Oh, I would say the Song of Songs, which is from the Old Testament, and it's a poem, but it sounds like it's talking about people's love of each other, but I would really say it describes how God loves us and we love God. I was on a retreat once some years ago and discovered that poem in a different way, or to the whole book, and fell in love with that whole reading, the Song of Songs.
Cool. I would not have guessed that.
No, most people don't.
All right, here's a good one. Why do we go to confession?
We go to confession so that we can get closer to God, because anybody can talk to God, right?
Well, so why can't we just confess our sins to God?
And I would say everybody should talk to God and just get it off their chest. I have a car. This is the parish house, and my car's right there. And most of the stuff in my car I can fix, but my manual says I should go in once in a while to get it tuned up, looked at, make sure things are running okay. But if I would go out there right now and it wouldn't start, I wouldn't know what to do. I'd probably open the hood, because people do that. And I'd need someone to help me get it going. Well, confession is the church's way of helping people not only stay tuned up, but get going when there's a big breakdown. But everybody can, and everybody should, just talk to God 99% of the stuff we do and just say, God, I'm sorry. We start Mass like that. But it's good to have a tune-up. I mean, like in the church, we typically do it twice a year before Christmas and Easter, so you focus and say, what could I do better? What could I work on? But if there's ever a big breakdown, like something huge, then the church is there to help to really get back on the road.
So, imagine you hear quite a few confessions.
Yes.
Do you remember the sins that people confess to you when you see them afterward, and then think a little differently of them?
Actually, never. There's something about the grace of that sacrament that myself, and I would think any priest, is really more attuned to the person and their journey as opposed to the details of what they did or didn't do. I'll give you an example. Oftentimes people will come in and say, I remember the last time I was here and I said this and this. I'm like, no, not a clue. Because more focused on the whole power of forgiveness. So when people say, he's thinking differently about me, it's like, I would say never worry about it, because more inclined to think about, this is a person who wants to get closer to God or wants to deepen their spirituality.
So somebody wrote in that they've heard that the Pope goes to confession weekly. How often should we be going? Just kind of the 2 times a year?
Yeah, I say seasonally would be great. Like 4 times a year would be wonderful. But I have to tell people it would really be good for all those important dates of someone's life, like say, like your birthday or my birthday would go, or an anniversary. But certainly twice a year is pretty much the norm, what people have been doing. I'm actually old enough to remember when people used to go weekly, which I think it was way too much, because I don't think that's kind of almost abusing the sacrament that much. It's like going to the Mayo Clinic for a headache. You don't need to go that, as opposed to just talking to God. But most often today, people don't go enough, which I think is too bad. They're missing out the grace, but just missing out the opportunity for a tune-up. Because like we do a service here, and people are like, what should I think of? And what should I do? Can I comment more about the Pope's thing? Because people will ask, what did the Pope do? Like, what's he confessing? And I have no idea. But I can tell you what I often confess is what's called sins of omission, that I didn't do something. Like I could have been nicer, or could have been kinder, or I could have said that differently. And probably my biggest sin is not trusting God enough. Where I say, I gotta just let go and let God be in charge. And so maybe the Pope has a similar journey.
So, ironically, confession has been a pretty hot topic here. Last one on confession.
Okay.
Can you confess your sins to yourself?
Wait, say that again.
Can you confess your sins to yourself?
No, you cannot do that. Every once in a while, someone will call up and say, "Can I confess over the phone?" And I'm like, "No." It's a face-to-face encounter. No, we can't. I can't absolve myself, because there's something powerful about owning it, talking, and then having somebody else respond in that presence of Christ. Very powerful. That's a cute question.
Yeah. All right. Well, let's move on to something else. What do other Christians mean when they say they are a born-again Christian?
For a lot of people, I think that they have this kind of drought in their life. And at one point when they actually are inflamed or empowered, an awakening, I call it. They call it being born again. Jesus uses that term in Gospel of John when he's talking to Nicodemus. And Jesus is referring to someone who is like, has never heard of God or has never been a spiritual person, and talking about being born again. Well, now most everybody has heard of God. Certainly a lot of people in this area have heard of Jesus. So the born again experience is more of an awakening or a deepening. And most often what a lot of people go through is that they've gone through some really bad places in their life. Like they've done things, or they have been not as they should be, and they have this big turnaround. I like to say that for a lot of people, they have this kind of mountaintop experience and highs and lows, and then they're really excited and they drop down and out there. For most mainline religions like Catholic, it's more of like a line with little bumps in it. For a lot of Catholics, they probably have some highlights, but it's not the big, huge mountains and valleys, but it's more like little bumps. And I'd like to think that we're all kind of on this incline, getting closer to God.
So, in your opinion, why should we attend church regularly, weekly, as opposed to Christmas and Easter, maybe once a month?
Well, besides the fact that Jesus didn't tell us to do a lot of things directly, but one of the things he did is to say, take this is my body. Take this is my blood. I think the biggest reason people can and should go is to receive the sacraments. Is you get that burst of grace, which the sacrament is, that you're not going to get in any other form. I mean, you read the Bible, which is great. You listen to songs that are Christian-based, great. But it's not the same as receiving that grace or that presence of God. So in the Catholic tradition, as you know, we could go every day, which I think is good, and we have a lot of people who do. For most people, they try to go weekly, and I think for a lot of people, they say it sets their week differently. Such as when they don't go, they just feel like they just don't have that grace or that oomph to get going in the week. I would like to think that priests or people don't come because of the priest. Like, I hope they come because of Christ. I mean, I know that's not always the case, because people come because they like the music, or they like the flowers, or they like the thing. But ideally, it should be centered in Christ, because every part of the Mass, that's our focus. And when I say Christ, it's that whole death to life experience. Mm-hmm. So, like, it's a tough week. So take the Eucharist to give you your power bar, your grace to face the challenges of the week. Pope Francis himself said the Eucharist is not a reward for a good week, and I say it's more like fuel for the week ahead, or the time ahead.
Strength for the journey.
Strength for the journey. There we go. I like that.
And if you do miss church, you can always check out our homilies that we record, and they are on our website online. So check that out. Let's see. Describe how living as a priest is different from just being a regular Catholic.
I would say, in one sense, there is not a lot of difference in the fact that we eat and sleep and take care of a house and all the things that everybody does. I think in one way priests have an advantage because I don't have the usual stress that a lot of families do, especially those who have kids, and just getting them going in the morning or dealing with drama. And a lot of times, even in relationships like a spousal, there can be a lot of drama. So I don't have that. And people often say, "Oh, you poor thing, you're alone." And I always tell people, "No, I'm never alone. I mean, I've got God with me." So, in one sense, I think priests have the advantage because every time I come here, like this is the house I live in, I just feel the presence of God. So it's, in a sense, you could say, for me, God is my spouse, my best friend, my comrade, my go-to. And for a lot of people, there's other people that's their go-to, like a spouse or a parent or a child. And priests, that's right there with God. But yes, we do everything. We brush our teeth. I buy toilet paper. I wash my car. I scream at the Vikings. Nah, not too often, but just in a lot of ways, I think people have a notion that somehow we live different lives, or that I'm praying all the time. Mm-hmm. No.
All right. I got another good one here.
Okay.
How should we tithe if we don't have a steady source of income? Like, let's say somebody's in college and they don't work, or they work sporadically on breaks. How should that person decide to contribute to the church?
Well, the whole notion of tithing is not just to help the church, but it's really to help the person, because it's in giving that you receive. And I would say, even if someone can't give on a regular basis, when they encounter some kind of income or resources or goodness, to think about, how can I share this now? How can I give this back to others? How can I give to God? So even like little kids who may not have an income, I say, well, what you do have, think right away saying, I want to give something back to God, or I want to give something to the church or the community. So I'm saying, if you have that, it's more of an attitude than an action, to think of everything we have is from God. And now I've got this, how can I give back? But people can do service, people can share their talents, people can participate in things, and I think that's also a wonderful thing to do. It's that whole sense of giving.
All right. Does it bother you when there are noisy kids at church?
Only rarely. And typically when I'm preaching, it does not bother me. One of the ways that I prepare my homilies is I actually write them many days ahead of time. I'm always thinking weeks ahead. Like right now I've got the homily going for a couple weeks ahead. And when I actually write it out, a good way for me to memorize is actually while I'm driving. So I'm thinking of the homily, and then I'm concentrating on the road. So when I get into that zone at Mass, I'm kind of in that zone where the things don't distract me. But I feel badly if there's a singer or a reader and there's a kid that's obviously not happy and people can't even hear because the kid is screaming or
right.
talking loud. Then I think I'm more, and probably I'm more, I feel badly for the parents. It's got to be tough.
Yep.
As a parent, probably your kid never has done that.
I can think of a time or two, maybe.
But that's got to be very, very tough, because you don't want them to scream, and there they are doing that. And so, by the way, I'm just glad people bring their kids to church. I think that's the way that's part of who we are. I don't think, never ever be afraid of your kids screaming or yelling. They do, we'll take them out for a bit, bring them back, or use the cry room. But even the cry room, I think, is overrated. I like people to be in the church, and then just take them out occasionally, but come back in, to be with the big community.
Yeah, it's kind of a way to train them in.
Yeah, and those of you who do have kids, I often tell, come to the front. I think kids, when they have something that they can see right up close, I think they'd be more attentive as opposed to back. Yeah, and some things we do, like at our church, we have kids come up around the Lord's Prayer and we'll hold hands as a community. We'll have all the kids do that. And then we have like kids can bring their offering up. So we really try to incorporate kids a lot. I think we do a good job as a parish type of thing.
Yep.
So
and 10:30 at the 10:30 masses on Sunday, we have children's liturgy of the Word, where they get a special Bible lesson just for them also.
Exactly. Yeah. So yeah, they are not the future of the church. They are the church.
All right. Can priests adopt kids?
Yes, we can. I only know of one priest in this area who's done that. More about a situation where the kids were in a need, they were in an orphanage. I would not do that myself just because my life is so, I love what I do, but it's so hectic, that job, and I think kids really need that regular presence. Stability, and like just the other night I got called out late at night to attend to somebody who was dying, which I'm very glad to do, but I think it would be very neglectful as a parent, because in a sense the congregation becomes my kids. So like when they say, like earlier tonight I was at an athletic event because kids, hey, you want to come to this? Like everybody becomes my children. So when that happens, I'd probably have to forego some things if I had these adopted kids, and I wouldn't be able to attend to them as well.
Mm-hmm. Kind of a disservice both ways,
yeah,
to the church and to the children.
Right. And there are a lot of Protestant ministers who are married and have kids, and they have it figured out, and kudos to them, but I think in the system we have now, because yeah, it just would not work too well.
Sure. How do you recommend to people how to read the Bible with a purpose?
I would say the worst way to read the Bible is from the front to the back, because you're going to get bogged down and think that's not any good. If you're going to start reading the Bible, go to the New Testament. That's our book as Christians. Another terrible way is simply to flop it open and like, I have a question, and what's the answer? But for most people, I would say read it slower, in the fact that it's not so much getting through like a whole chapter or a whole page, but letting it soak in. So even like to think of this verse and go, oh, because even if you concentrate on the same verse daily, it could mean something. So even though we hear the stories again and again every third year or so, hopefully we're different each time. So like at this time, what is God having to say for you? So if you got your Bible, read it, and then think of your Bible as a workbook. Draw in it, highlight it, put pictures in it. Don't think of it as like, oh, this sacred book that I can't touch. No. It should feel, worn and loved.
How long did it take you to become a priest? And did you have an aha moment that guided you toward being a priest?
Yes. Yes and yes. To be a priest, you get a Master's of Divinity degree, which is 4 years after college. So you could technically major in anything in college, but you need to have a certain amount of philosophy classes to get into this master program. And then it's 4 years of theology. So I went to St. John's School of Theology. Great school, wonderful program. And yes, I did have an aha moment. I don't think I was ever against being a priest growing up, and I probably different times thought of like, that'd be okay. But at a point in my life after I graduated, that wasn't what I was thinking I was going to do. And I really had an aha voice of God, feel a presence that set me in a direction, and I haven't regretted it once. And that was back in 1978 when that happened to me.
Wow, that's a long time ago.
A little older than you.
Yeah.
I think, yes.
Yeah, a little bit. Here's an interesting one. How do you feel when somebody has family members are not Catholic and they receive communion?
Yes, that's a tough one, because a lot of churches, what they want to do is to make sure people know that they are not welcomed. So they'll even say something like that, whether it's in a program or they'll announce that at communion time. I believe that people should know what the policy is or the rules, but then it's really up to that person whether they want to receive, and I'm not the one to judge. That goes against a lot of mainstream policies of churches, because they really want people to like act this way or believe this. The danger of that is that if we really played that out, we probably have nobody worthy. Because if you really thought you have to be in good standing, you have to be this perfect Catholic, you have to agree with everything, I think the church would be empty and no one would come. So what happens a lot of times, if someone comes to communion and it's obvious that I don't know if it's obvious, that they don't act like they know what they're doing, I would say, I'm not one to judge. If they're coming up and sincerely want to receive, then who am I to say you can't receive? I think the only time I would step in is if I would cause scandal. Sure. Like if people are really like, oh my gosh, this person was just screaming outside the church that they hate the church and then came in to do something. I mean, it's really causing a problem. They don't have to step in.
Okay. What's your favorite Bible story?
Wow. I like so many of them. I think the go-to one, which is a favorite of many people, is the prodigal son story in Luke's gospel. Mm-hmm. It just resonates to so many people because they feel either like the son who has gone away a bit, felt lost, or the older sibling who is jealous and like, why can't I get those same benefits and why am I loved the same? So I think it's one of those universal stories that touches so many people in different levels.
Yeah. Do you ever do weddings where only one, either the bride or the groom, is Catholic? And will you ever do an outdoor wedding?
I've done many weddings where one is Catholic and one is not Catholic. I think back in the day when people lived in communities that were kind of more excluded, some people didn't even know any people who weren't their same religion. You had a group of Baptists or Lutherans or Catholics. Actually, my mom was Catholic and she married my dad who was Lutheran. So even in my own family, and this is back in the 50s, and neither church would do the wedding in the church. So they got married in the office of the priest's rectory. They got pictures. I know it's very, very odd. And now there's no problem at all as far as church ritual and church doctrine. We love to do them. And I also would like to do weddings outside. Actually, I keep nudging the leaders in our diocese to keep looking at that. And there are dioceses that did it. I did a sabbatical in Australia some years ago, and they do weddings outside. So it's possible to do them because we do masses outside now, like
right.
Polka masses and
Fall Fest,
which we have.
Mm-hmm.
So you can do a sacrament outside. I think the church is hesitant because they're afraid it's going to get abused and people are going to do goofy things. Mm-hmm. I was attending an outdoor wedding recently. It didn't go very well. It was really hot. There was a lot of bugs. The speakers weren't working well.
Welcome to Minnesota. Right?
No, so I would support doing them, but it's so much better in a church because you have control over bugs and heat and sound system and rain things. But for a lot of people, they're choosing not to get married in church. I say, well, we should give them an option and make it available.
Sure.
So I'm going to keep fighting for that, by the way.
Good to know. Who was or is a role model for you in your faith life?
Wow. I can think of saints, Saint Francis has always been one of my go-to. I spent time in Assisi and just everything about him and his whole view of the church and rebuild my church. But are you talking about like a live person, do you think? Or
that's kind of what I was thinking,
okay.
But I didn't ask the question actually.
Okay. Let me think. I had a spiritual director who just retired. His name is Dick Rice, Jesuit, ex-Jesuit. Just a very prayerful man and a very wise man. So he's just a good role model of like how I want to be. He just doesn't get rattled up with things and could really listen well. And it's like, I want more of that. Just be able to sit with someone and listen.
Here's a hot topic.
Uh-oh.
Why can't women be priests?
Yes, that comes up in nearly every Q&A that I've ever participated in. The reason that the church says they can't is the fact that they haven't been, such as like they haven't been priests, and perhaps Jesus would have had them back in the day, and Jesus only had 12 men as disciples. There's arguments both ways, such as, well, women were not considered as important as men back in the day, although Jesus talked to Mary Magdalene, one of the first persons after the resurrection, and certainly was close to his mother. But I think now it's more of a cultural thing, and I think why the church is hesitant to do it now is because here in the U.S. and in Europe, women have equal status in many ways. We've still got to work on more. But if women could be priests anywhere in the world, we're still dealing with a lot of women being second-class citizens. I'm thinking like third world countries. So we really have to build up the whole world's recognition of women have equal rights as far as education and wages and benefits. And right now, so much of the world, they wouldn't even consider that. So they would really tore things. So when we think of it, it's more of like a first world question. So we really have to work on those other parts of the world. I would love to have women be ordained. Right now, Pope Francis has invited discussion on women being deacons, and that's actually in the Bible. There were women deaconesses. And so just the fact of talking about it, I think, would be great. So just for that, people to contemplate what it would mean to have a woman as your faith leader or your sacrament giver. It's kind of exciting.
Yeah. Another hot topic.
Uh-oh.
Does God forgive someone who commits suicide?
Wow. So murder is considered one of the big sins. And obviously when someone commits murder, there is no chance for them to go to confession, such as like if somebody else would like, I killed this person, and I'm sorry, I could go to confession. I think suicide is a mental health issue. It's not a moral issue, such as we can't judge. I have no idea. In the Catholic Church, we have never said, we know for sure that this person is in hell. We know for sure that God will never forgive them. It doesn't happen at all. We have no list of people who God has not forgiven or in hell. So when somebody has committed suicide, unfortunately, I've got to think they're not in their best stage of mind. And so I don't think how God is going to look at them or judge them. We don't know. It's terrible. But I would like to think that, it has to deal more with mental health than it does with morality. So the more we can get people healthier, I think that question someday hopefully never exists because no one's even thinking of that. So, and a lot of people who have tried suicide or thinking of suicide, if that's any of you, please talk. Don't hold that secret in. Go talk to somebody, a friend, a teacher, a priest, a church worker. Just because, obviously, you can get better. You don't have to stay in that kind of darkness.
Is there purgatory? And what really is purgatory?
Yes, there is purgatory. And purgatory, in the classic sense, is like not yet heaven. But even like a couple of our recent popes have said, we got to stop thinking of it as a place. So perhaps purgatory is that was purgatory. It's just a moment. It's not so much a place. A lot of people have talked about near-death experiences where they die and they have a tunnel and they see a bright light at the end. Maybe that's purgatory. Maybe that tunnel is purgatory. In a classic sense, the person is not quite in full bliss with God. They're there, but they're not quite there. So I think purgatory is kind of like on the route there. But who knows? Maybe that's purgatory. It's that fast. It's not so much a space or a time, but it's just a not quiteness. So, but again, we don't ever say that we know for sure someone is in purgatory for all time, or they're never going to get out. We don't say that at all.
All right. Could you become bishop? Or are there certain things that priests have to do to become bishop?
In the past, to be a qualified candidate for bishop, they looked for people who went to school in Rome. They looked to people who were administrators, like they ran seminaries or they ran schools. And a lot of good men came from that, but unfortunately a lot of them had no pastoral experience. I mean, they rarely were with people. They didn't deal with suicide. They didn't deal with a divorce. Now with Pope Francis, what he's been doing, from what I can tell, his trend is that he's specifically choosing priests who are or were pastors. They have a lot of pastoral experience, as opposed to someone who has a lot of academic experience, or a lot of, they worked in what we call the tribunal, or they worked in the chancery. And Pope Francis is turning that around to say, no, I want the priests, he used the term, to smell like the sheep. I mean, I want people to really get in there. Pope Francis says, I want the church to be a field hospital. So I really think he's looking for people who are pastoral. Could I be a bishop? Sure. I mean, would I want to be? Nope. I like being with the sheep. I like being in the trenches. And I think unfortunately, a lot of bishops, they have to deal with more committees. Mm-hmm. They have to do more with policies. And they go and do these big ceremonies like confirmations. I'd rather do the day, like today, going to this athletic event, or just being with people. Oh, and doing something like this. Yeah, I don't know if a lot of bishops get a chance to do this Facebook Live thing, so I'm delighted to be asked for this. This is, I've never done anything like this before.
Yeah. Well, this one is definitely a question from the audience.
Uh-oh, okay.
We're going to throw that out here first. Your singing voice is amazing.
Okay.
What are your thoughts on song being important in church?
Oh, it's not even my thoughts. It comes right from the rubrics of church that music needs to be part of the liturgy, any liturgy. Some people want quiet masses. I think they just want to get out of there. They just want to do their duty and get out. I think they're missing out. When you sing, you pray twice. We are blessed at our parish with a lot of good singers and a great music program. We've got a phenomenal music director in Mo Putnam. So I'm lucky to be there and to add to that. But thank whoever for that compliment. But we also have a lot of people with amazing voices in our parish. So I'm glad to be part of that.
All right. How should we talk to our grown-up children that have left the church about some of the church's views they disagree with? For instance, LGBTQ issues.
Yes. First of all, I think anybody who has a problem with issues in the church, I think the way to get those addressed is to stay in the church to get them figured out, as opposed to, I don't like this, so I'm going to leave. Well, that doesn't help anybody, as opposed to, I want to stay in there and I want to work on it, I want to talk. I think for those of you who have family members who have left the church or are mad at the church, they think they get stuck in the fact that they're thinking the church is only about rules or only about policy. It's really about one's relationship with God and one's encounter with Christ. And I think for anybody, the more that you can share your Christ experiences, your God moments, and how that then comes together to worship, or comes together to pray with other people, I think is huge. But I think the more people, and not lecture, you should, that just doesn't work. I think people only change out of love. They're only going to be invited back out of a loving response, and not out of a lecture. But I would say the church has always evolved, and I would say perhaps the church is still evolving, such as issues on how we treat gay and lesbians, how we treat divorced and remarried people, how we treat people who don't quite understand or get all the rules of the Catholic Church. We have been evolving ever since we came together, as far as like back in Acts, and evolving is like, is the world flat or not? Can you be a slave owner or not? We've always been evolving, and I have to say that we're still evolving. I would hate to be part of a church that, nope, these are the rules, it's set, we're never going to change, we're never going to grow. So I'd like to think that those people who have questions, we need you in the church to ask those questions. Not to yell, not to scream, but to say, I wonder if, and those things. Help us grow. So please come and challenge us and share your experiences.
All right. What is the difference between a mortal sin and just a regular sin? And are there any unforgivable sins?
Ooh. Well, classically, a mortal sin means that if you commit the sin and you don't confess it, you will not have immortality. I mean, you will not be with God forever. Some of the classic ones that you can think of are killing someone, intentionally killing someone, would be, say, sex that's not in a marriage situation, intercourse that's not in a marriage situation. And then another big one is speaking for God. We call it blasphemy. So in a sense, those mortal sins are like when you're playing God. I'm saying when this life should end, or I think I know better when this life should begin, or this is what God said. There is no unforgivable sin, although it seems now like in church, especially priests, those priests who have committed a sexual abuse crime, somehow we have deemed them unforgivable. I mean, they have been, it's awful. That whole situation is awful, of any kind of abuse of anybody, but especially a minor, and especially a sexual abuse of a minor. But somehow we think that someone who does something, there's just no chance that there's ever a place for us again. And I don't think that's how Christ would respond. Not that we have to, we can tolerate that, not that we can say, oh, no big deal. But if we really believe in God's love, every action is forgivable, no matter who did it or how many times. So,
Okay.
you got a lot of questions here.
You guys are doing an awesome job. This is good.
I'm amazed at how this is working. Wow. Keep them coming. I love it. This is great.
All right. What happened to all the people who lived before Jesus died?
Yes, such as lived and died.
Yeah, right. Died
Yeah.
before Jesus came.
Right. We don't know, but I would like to think that Jesus opened the screening door, kind of like at an airport. You like say, okay, come in. You don't have to have the screening anymore. That Jesus came in and said, I want all of you to be with God. So we don't know exactly what those people are, because we don't know God. But I would like to think that they just got a wonderful ticket to say, wow, because of Jesus, I now have this opportunity. Even though I died before he was born, I have this wonderful opportunity to be with God. But like I said, we don't know for sure.
All right. Here's one that just came in from someone named David. I was very impressed a year or two ago when Christ Our Light let another religion use the North Building for a funeral. I'd never experienced this before. Does this happen often?
It can happen often. There's no reason it can't happen. In both the towns of Princeton and Zimmerman, we are the largest church building, and we are always welcome to let anybody use our building, especially in those situations with a funeral. So there's no problem at all. Sometimes what happens is we might remove the Blessed Sacrament from the tabernacle, just so people don't have to be confused about the presence of Christ in the tabernacle. And I think we do that. But as far as using the church, actually we also use the church for like concerts. We have used the church for lectures. We use the church for plays. So it's not just for Catholic services.
Cool. For those who are going into college, or those who are in college but just aren't having that aha moment on what to do with their life, what do you suggest?
Wow. Be patient. Sometimes that aha moment never comes, and sometimes it's all around you. It's just the fact that you're looking for the Hollywood ending, that kind of birds singing and unicorns and things. But I think God is always trying to get to us. I think God is always trying to give us a message, and sometimes we just have to slow down a little bit and take stock. I always encourage everybody to pray every day. I do, actually. Just right here is my prayer chair right here. I don't know if you can see that. Can you move that cap? I sit right here with my cup of coffee, look out the window. And what prayer does for me is helps me reflect on the day before and get ready for the day coming up. And I think for a lot of people, they don't reflect enough as far as like just taking time. And so when you think of like, oh, let me think about my day, or some people, they'll pray it before they go to sleep at night, which again is a great time. But just to reflect and like, oh, and when you start reflecting, you start thinking, well, that was a aha. I didn't think of it at the time, but when you start putting things together, that God is trying to get to you more and more. As far as direction for their life, I think if you go into whatever honestly, because you want to do it, and you go into it and really trying to say, how can I make an impact in the world, serve God, you're going to be in good shape. But most people get caught into, how can I make money, how can I look good, what's going to get me more popularity or success. And I think you will always be disappointed. You'll always be sad, as opposed to, what is God? Here's a question for you. Ask, God, what do you want for me? As opposed to say, God, this is what I want.
And be ready to listen for the answer.
And be ready to listen. Yeah, exactly.
All right. This person says they have a lot of non-Catholic friends who ask why we pray to Mary, specifically even the Hail Mary prayer, and through the saints, and not just straight to God.
Well, that's a great question. First of all, Catholics do not pray to Mary. You cannot do that. It's impossible. And Catholics do not pray to the saints. It's impossible. But I think for all of us, we can get a lot of prayer support. So what you're doing is you're praying through Mary, or you're praying through the saints. Just like let's say I have an issue, Teresa. And so, of course, I can talk to God about that. But then I can also say, well, Teresa, would you also talk to God about that for me? And you say, sure. So, like, why not? Like, if I get more prayer support, and then let's say, Teresa, I've still got my need, and you die, I assume you're in heaven, okay? So I still need this prayer support. So I'm saying, well, Teresa, could you still keep praying for me? When you talk to God, and that's what Mary does, and the saints. They may not be here, but they still are advocates for us. Do you have to pray through Mary? Of course not. Do you have to pray through somebody? Of course not. But why not? They are there to help. We have this communion of saints. So like, hey, take advantage of this team who's on your side. Go for it.
All right. What does it mean to be created in God's image besides just the physical image?
Again, another good questions here. I take it more whenever I hear that is the image is of compassion and forgiveness and love, or we talk about the virtues or the fruits of the Spirit. I think we all have an ability to be God-like, how we treat one another and treat the world. And for most of us, we don't think we do, or that's for those kind of people who are perfect or saintly or saw Jesus. But I think all of us we're created in God's image, so we all have the capability to forgive, be kind, share good news, be hopeful. I guess that's the biggest thing, is to be hopeful.
We're running a little short on time.
Wow,
so I know
quick.
It flew by. So I think this could be our last one.
Okay. Looking for a good one?
Yeah.
Okay. And I'm going to say, these are not pre-rehearsed at all. I got it right. So thank you for these live questions. I really appreciate that.
So you've mentioned in some of your homilies that you have a strong belief in the power of dreams.
Yes.
Do you have a recommended author on this subject?
I do not. I think you are your best author because everything in the dream is meant to be a manifestation of part of you. So an author will often say, oh, if you're dreaming about a horse, it means this and this. But no, because a horse might mean this to that person and this to that person. And I think a dream can be on different levels. It can be expansive. So those of you who are remembering your dreams and writing them down, keep doing that. Keep sharing them and see what God has in store for you. But I do think God does speak to us in our dreams.
Jenny, do we have time for one more?
Yes, we do have time for one more.
Okay. How do I get my teen and preteens to go to church? To want to go to church? My parents forced me to church when I was a teenager, and it took me about 15 years to find my way back to church. How do you suggest avoiding
Wow.
that?
Well, first of all, I do think that everybody needs to go to church, okay, as a kid. Just because for a lot of times parents struggle so much, so they opt out on that one. But you don't give your kid a choice about going to school or the dentist, or no, this is what we do as a family. So part of it is like, go to church. But even as a parent, make it more positive. If the kid only hears a parent complain about church, or, oh, that was awful, why are they going to say, oh, goody? But I would say here's one thing to do is make it a fun event, such as like, let's do something afterwards. Let's go out to breakfast, or let's do an activity. But even for everybody to say, okay, on your way home, what is one thing you got out of the Mass today? Could be part of a song, could be part of a reading, maybe part of the homily, and everybody gets to share. And there's no wrong answers. But they gotta like think about what's to go. The other part of that, I know that people who actually sit closer, people who actually participate, like they volunteer, always get more out of it. I'm not sure. Some people they think they're shy, but once you just take that leap and like you actually hold somebody's hand or become a reader or a singer, you get the grace of it. So, and again, we are wrapping up our time. So I want to thank all of you. This is an incredible, thank you for having us come into your lives and your homes. And again, remember you are welcome at our parish, Christ our Light. And when in doubt, go to Mass. You got an issue, go to church and see what God has in store for you. Go get the sacraments. Or just come and hang out at our church anytime. We'd love to have you.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.